Element 6, musculoskeletal health. The learning outcomes 6.1, work-related upper limb disorders, 6.2, manual handling, and 6.3, load handling equipment. Okay. So we have three topics from element 6. Okay. So out of the 21 topics, you have options to choose one from the element number 6. Okay. So again, the requirement, yes. So the requirement is to select at least 10 different hazard categories from at least 5 different elements. Okay. So minimum from 5 different elements, topics or hazard categories must be chosen, or you can choose more than 5, but minimum from 5 elements, topics must be chosen, and as a minimum 10 out of these 21 must be identified. Okay. So with regards to element number 6, we have three hazard categories: work-related upper limb disorders, manual handling, and load handling equipment. Okay. What is work-related upper limb disorders? Now, when we refer to the limb, we refer to the hands and the legs. Upper limb, it means the upper part of the limb. For example, from the fingers to the arm to the to the shoulder extending up to the neck is called as the upper limbs. Okay. So upper limb is comprises from the finger to the shoulder. Okay. And here work related upper limb disorders. So what type of work activities or what are the causes that could lead to disorders to the upper limb? And then we would discuss on how to mitigate those disorders of the work related upper limb. So musculoskeletal disorders, in short referred to as MSD, these are injuries or disorders of muscles, nerves, tendons, joints, cartilage, and intervertebral disc. Okay. So where the injuries to muscles or to the nerves or to the tendons. So tendons are, again, it's a tissue. Okay. So it is a collective tissue that binds the bone to the muscle. Okay. So for example, what is wrong with Pradeep? Okay, so you could see here. So tendon is, it binds muscle to bone. Okay, so as you could see in this image, it is a connective tissue that connects the muscle to the bone. Okay, this is called as tendon. And then similarly, there is another connective tissue called the ligament, which connects bone to bone. So with reference to the musculoskeletal disorders, these are the injuries, okay, or the disorders that affects the muscles, nerves, tendons, joints, cartilage, and intervertebral disc. And ergonomics is the relationship or interface between the worker, equipment they are using, the way in which they are using the equipment, and the environment in which the work is taking place. Okay. So consider the what type of equipment you are using at workplace, or in what environment you're working. Okay. Or what the interface with which you're interacting. Okay. So according to the needs of the worker, the work equipment, the working environment, they must be modified to match the capabilities of the individual. As an individual, they must not get adapted to poor workstations, to poor equipment, or to poor environment. So, for example, if you ask me, I'm using the equipment, for example, the chairs and the table and then the laptop. So these are the equipments I am using. Okay, and then the workstation setup and the environment. So environment, I'm referring to the lighting, the ventilation, and then the temperatures. All these refer to the environment. So if I'm working but where I'm using an unsuitable equipment. Okay, for example, the chair, it doesn't have the option to adjust the height of the chair, or the chair doesn't provide me a good support, to support my back, or if the chair doesn't have a proper hand rest, okay, or if the table is not adjustable. So with poor work environment, it may contribute to musculoskeletal disorders because I may not able to maintain a correct or good posture when sitting and working. So if I have to sit and work for like 4 hours or 8 hours, it is important that I should be provided with a good ergonomic chair. I should have a good environment. For example, if the lighting is causing glare to my screen, then every time I have to, change my body position to view my screen properly, or I may have to tilt the screen to so that I can view to avoid the glare. So what happens is I am getting adapted to the poor lighting, or I am getting adapted to the poor chair that I am using. So instead, the glare should be avoided, comfortable working chair must be provided, and a good workstation must be provided. So ergonomic is about the relationship between the worker and the environment, between the worker and the equipment they are using, and the worker and the equipment that they are using in which it is taking place. So poorly designed task and workstation. So if the task is designed poorly, or if the workstation setup is poor, it can lead to aches and pains in the neck, shoulders, and upper limbs. Okay, so if you are not able to maintain a correct posture when sitting and working, or when carrying out any task, then it could lead to musculoskeletal disorders such as pains in the neck, shoulders, stiffness in the hands, reduced mobility, like the you would find it very difficult to flex or move your fingers. Okay, swollen joints, and then numbness in the hands and fingers because of disruption of the blood flow in your fingers, and then weakness and loss of dexterity in the hands, tenderness in the limbs, so your tissues it gets weakened, especially at the joints, and then poor quality sleep and disturbed sleep patterns. So these are all the causes of poorly designed workstations. And is for others, uh, do you get any challenges with the videos? So is your connectivity is smooth for others? Uh, Maybe Vinod, you can see if there is any application running in the background, or if it is still persisting, then I may turn off my video. So that may, require a less bandwidth speed. Is what about others? Are you facing? Okay. So workers in a packaging department are loading components into a cardboard box from a seated position. Okay, I repeat, workers in a packaging department, they are loading components into a cardboard box from a seated position. The work involves bending forward. The workers have complained of stiff and aching backs. So you can imagine the task that they are doing is they are picking a component and then they are loading it into a cardboard box. And it is in a seating position. So you can think they are, for example, imagine the component are on the ground level. So they are stored on the ground. So every time I have to bend forward to pick the component from the ground, and then I have to load it into the cardboard box. Let's say it is on the table. So every time I have to bend forward, pick the component and load it onto the cardboard box. And this is not just one time, a task. It is a repetitive task. Okay. For example, every 1 minute, I may have to bend and pick the component into the and load into the cardboard box like 10 to 15 times. So every 1 minute, 15 times I am bending forward, and this is very much repetitive. So it is very clear this kind of task can lead to musculoskeletal disorders, where in turn the workers have complained about it. So, as a short term measure, workers are advised to spend some time sitting and sometimes standing while carrying out the work. Okay. A longer term measure is eventually put in place. A conveyor belt is positioned in front of the workers, so there was no need to bend forward. The contributing factor for the disorder or for the injury is bending forward in a seating position. So the ultimate solution is how you can avoid people to bend forward when carrying out the task. So here the conveyor belt is positioned in front of the workers, so there was no need to bend forward. Okay, so this eliminated the problem. So consider where a similar adjustment may be helpful in your own workplace. Okay. Now WRULD, work related upper limb disorders. It is a medical condition that affects the muscles, tendons, ligaments, nerves, joints, and other soft tissues in the upper part of the body. So, which is from the neck down to the hands and fingers. So, from the neck to the finger refers to upper limb. Okay, so it is WRULD is a medical condition that affects the muscles, joints, tissues, tendons, ligaments from the fingers to the neck. So it can be caused by work or made worse by work. Okay. So any medical condition that affects the upper limb, it comes under WRULD, which is upper limb disorder. Okay. Now, so here you can see like what we discussed earlier, difficult sleeping, pain in the neck, shoulders, back, and upper limbs, swollen joints, muscle weakening, fatigue, tendon strains, again, weakening of those tendons and ligament tissues, numbness and weakness in the hands and fingers, and possible loss of dexterity. So again, dexterity is the ability to move and flex your hands and fingers. So what are the causes that could include W or ULD? If you're doing a task where the actions are repetitive, okay, so like I said, every 1 minute, if I have to bend forward, pick a component, and then load into a cardboard box, so this is an example of a repetitive action. Okay. So if your actions are repetitive, or if your task requires to use an excessive force. Okay, so for instance, you're using a hammer, as a tool for the work. So it requires you're putting some excessive force to use that hammer. Okay, or if your task requires a long duration of work. Okay, so where you're working for a very long period of time with infrequent breaks, because with break it will give you some time for your muscles to rest and to relax. So without rest, if you're doing a task continuously, then that could increase the risk of musculoskeletal disorders. Or where high work rate is required and where you're using tools provided for that work, where inadequate training, for example, the worker is not trained on how to maintain a correct posture when they are at work. Okay, or if you're working in an environment, in terms of space, you have very limited or constrained space where you're not able to adopt different body postures. Okay, or in case of environment, if the lighting is poor or causing any glare or creation of shadows, or if the working position is uncomfortable, like you have to bend forward or stretch your hand. Okay, or if something that is not meeting your capabilities, for example, for a person who already have a history of a back pain or a muscle injury, for them these tasks could only aggravate the conditions. So if your work involves any of these or combination of these contributing factors, then there is a strong likelihood that it could cause musculoskeletal disorders. So how to avoid and minimize risk from poorly designed task and workstation? Now earlier we referred to WRULD is a medical condition, right? So for example, tendonitis. Okay, so it is referenced here, as you could see. Okay, it comes later. Okay. So tendonitis is the inflammation or irritation of a tendon. Okay, so tendons are connective tissues that connects the bone to the muscle. Okay, and in medical terms, anything that ends with itis is called inflammation. Okay, so itis, it is called inflammation. So when we say a medical condition, tendonitis, it means inflammation of tendons. Okay, so itis is inflammation, and inflammation of tendon is called the tendonitis. So it comes under WRULD because it affects the tendons on the upper limb. Okay, and then another condition, tennis elbow. Okay, it also comes under WRULD. Okay, so tennis elbow, it is named after the game tennis because this type of disorder is very much common with tennis players. And what is this condition is, it is a painful injury that affects the tendons attaching the forearm muscles to the outside of the elbow. So there would be an inflammation on the outside of the elbow. The reason is, if you look at those tennis players, their actions are repetitive. Okay, so very like when they are playing a game, every a few seconds they have to play a shot, and particularly when they play a backhand shot, they put too much of force onto the lower part of the elbow, and that causes tennis elbow. Okay, and it is also called as golfer's elbow because their actions are repetitive and where it requires them to use excessive force. Okay, so these are all the contributing factors. So similarly, there are many other medical conditions which comes under W or ULD, because anything that affects the upper limb, okay, in terms of your muscles or joints or tendons, it comes under W or ULD. Okay. So in terms of control measures, where repetitive work is a contributing factor in your task, the control is automation. Okay. So through automation, you can completely eliminate worker carrying out certain tasks that is very much repetitive, or employ more workers. By employing more workers, you can minimize on the repetition of the task, or job rotation. So if one worker is doing assembling of components for a 4 hour shift, it can be rotated with 2 or 4 workers. That will significantly reduce their repetitive. And where uncomfortable working position is a contributing factor, then alter the layout of the workstation. Okay, so if I have to bend my body, so then how you can avoid the worker bending forward, or if I have to stretch my hand to or overreach to pick an object, how you can design the layout to avoid stretching. Okay, and then adjustable seating. So all these could be considered as part of a control for uncomfortable working positions. And then excessive hours, long duration, include more breaks, again employ more workers, and allow workers to spread the work over more time. Okay, so by reducing the high work rate, so if people are doing for the work rate is high, like for 4 hours extensive work they are doing, increase the work time. And then use of excessive force, provide the correct tools or even power tools, provide lifting aids like a truck or a trolleys, or team handling. So rather one person lifting, you can have a team lifting. Okay, so these controls can be considered where use of excessive force is a factor. And then in terms of poor space, clear the work area. So maintain a good housekeeping, change the work layout, and carry out work in a different area. If still the space is very congested, then completely change the work area. And lighting should not be too low or too high. Matte surface where possible, because they don't cause reflection. No glare from the sun. So if there is a glare, then use of these window blinds, or suitable type of lighting depending on the nature of the work. So if I'm doing work which requires a very fine components or very small components, then my lighting level should be very high. Okay, and then suitable temperature with sufficient ventilation. So good airflow is required, and also where the temperature should be reasonable. It should not be very hot or very cold. And then tools provided for work, consider individual user requirements. So any tool a worker is using, it should have a proper handle or a grip point, so from where they can use the tool. The tool should not be heavy. Okay, if it is heavy, then it should be suspended. Okay, and then ensure equipment is adjustable. So where, for example, for a chair I am using, it I can have an adjust to the height of the chair, so I can maintain a good viewing position with my screen. Okay, so similarly with any tools, see if there are any possibility for the worker to adjust, okay, according to the requirements. And then where possible, the best control is to eliminate the need for equipment through mechanization or automation. And in terms of individual, Select individuals who do not have any health conditions like these back pains or muscle injuries, and any task given to worker should match the skills and their health needs. So workers must be medically fit to carry out those tasks which may lead to musculoskeletal disorders, and they must be appropriately trained. For example, I don't remember whether I have showed you this uh, case study, but let me know if we have already discussed this case study. Yes. So can you read this case study one? So I'll give you 3 minutes. Just read through this case study. Yes. So you could see from the case study that Eddie working on an engine assembly line. Okay. So they use a handheld impact wrench to fit a component to an engine. Okay. So if you want to see what an impact wrench, okay. So they are using the wrench to fit a component to the engine. Okay. And the assembly line makes up to 2400 engines a day, and it takes approximately 3 seconds to tighten each component. So it is very clear the task is repetitive, as well as the risk from using a vibrating tool. So Eddie often had to adopt poor postures to reach some parts of the engine. Okay, so not all component of the engine has easy access. So to access some part of the engine, he has to reach, you know. So he has to repeatedly stretch out is harm and constrain his posture while tightening the adapter. So you could see there are three contributing factors. One is the repetitive nature of the task. Second, use of the vibrating tool, the vibration transmitted to the upper limbs, and then stretch repeatedly stretching the arms and constrain the posture. So all this, it is very obvious that it contributed to these shoulder and neck pain. Okay, so as a control measure, they replaced the impact range with one with minimal reaction force. Okay, so with minimal reaction force, so that will reduce the vibrations that transmitted to the hand. And they also suspended the wrench, so Eddie did not have to support its weight. So he was using a handheld. So the entire weight of the wrench was also supported by the user. So now it is totally suspended. So he doesn't have to hold and carry the weight of the wrench. And third is modify the workplace layout. This is to minimize or prevent the repeatedly stretching out. Okay, so modify the workplace layout so workers have better access to all sides of the engine, and that would avoid the need to adopt poor working postures. And they implemented a job rotation, so five workers on the line, on the assembly line, were moved around a number of different tasks. Okay, so you could clearly see the solutions are very straightforward, and for this particular case study, so where the issues might look very uh, severe, okay, if left unattended. So by the worker complaining about the symptoms and the actions taken, so that prevents the long term ill health effects. So what are the benefits? A reduction in vibration exposure, no need to adopt poor and constrained postures, reduced boredom and fatigue, and most importantly, for the employer point of interest, it improves the productivity. Okay. Now, one more case study, and then we'll move back. Okay. Yes. So again, I'll give you 3 minutes. Please go through this case study too. Yes, DSE is display screen equipment. Okay. So under display screen equipment comes the laptops, the computers, control panel. So anything that has a display screen. Okay. Yes. So again, the solutions are very straightforward and simple solutions. So what is the problem is, so Julie working at reception, and the nature of the job is to use a telephone to take messages and redirect calls. And she uses a computer to make appointments, record messages, and respond to emails. Okay. So she complained of, the neck and shoulder pain and headache and sore eyes. So as part of the assessment, they found that Julie's computer screen was difficult to read because of glare and reflections from the light to the window. And second, because of that, she has to repeatedly adjust her posture to view the screen. Thirdly, she has to hold the telephone between her shoulder and ear, so like this. Okay, so between her shoulder and here, so she has to sit this awkward posture, and then she would also be typing a message on the computer. Okay, so these contributed to those the musculoskeletal disorders. And as a cost effective simple measure, she rearranged her workstation so that the screen no longer faced the window. Eye test to establish if Julie had any problems with her vision, and a hands-free telephone headset to eliminate Julie's neck and shoulder problem. This is to avoid maintaining this awkward posture of holding the telephone between her shoulder and ear. So as a result, the health problem diminished, and again you see productivity increase. So this is something that should be used as a justification for the management on why these controls must be implemented. Apart from the health and safety issues to be addressed, it also benefits the organizations in terms of the financial and the productivity improvement. Okay. So e-health of DSC work. So DSC, it refers to display screen equipment. Okay. Now if I go and search for DSC, working with display screen equipment. DSC or devices or equipment that have an alphanumeric or graphic display screen, and it includes display screens, laptops, touch screens, and other similar devices. Okay. So what are the health risks with DSC? Okay. People experience fatigue, eye strain, upper limb problems, and backache. And the contributing factor is from overuse. So using them continuous for long hours with infrequent breaks, and also improper use where they are maintaining a poor posture when sitting and working with DSC. Okay. So these problems can also be experienced from poorly designed workstation or work environment. Okay. So from the image you can see number one here is stress. So stress due to the demand of the work. Okay, if the work rate is very high, if you're working with DSC where the targets or demands are unrealistic. Okay, and then visual problems. So eye fatigue, your eyes would be strained because you're looking at the screen at a very short distance for long hours continuously. It is what happens is your eyes can get dried out. Okay, so in order to, it is important that you have to reflex your eye muscles. So that's why they say that every 20 minutes you look at an object 20 feet away for 20 seconds, so that will relax your eye muscles and prevent dryness. Okay, and then work related upper limb disorders. So again, the the pain to the upper limb from repetitive use of keyboards and mouse. Okay, so repetitively using keyboards to type or the mouse can cause muscle pain or weakening of the muscles on the fingers and the hands. And then musculoskeletal disorders, the back pain. Okay, so back pain due to a poor sitting posture, and also with contributing factors such as overuse. All this could result in back and shoulder and neck pain. So good DAC setup. Okay. So eyes in line with top of the screen. So the thumb rule is your eyes and the very top of the screen should be at the same level. Okay. So if they are not in the same level, either you adjust the height of your seat or increase the height of your monitor. Okay. So it is important that your eyes and the top line of the screen should be at the same level. So I should not be looking upward or downward to view the screen. Okay. And then relax shoulders. Try to position yourself high enough so you don't need to shrug your shoulders. So you have to keep your shoulders, at an upright posture and not to shrug. Okay. And then keyboard just below the elbow height. Okay, so your keyboard should be below your elbow height, and then a gap of 2 to 3 centimeter between the front of seat bottom and the back of knee. So this is important because it prevents you to sitting at the same posture for long period. So sometimes people they may have to change their posture. So there should be space here. Okay, so you can adopt to different postures, and then both feet comfortably on floor or footrest. So important to ensure that your foot should rest on the floor. If not, you should be provided with a footrest. Okay, your foot should never be suspended. If it is not resting on the floor or footrest, then it will put more pressure on the underside of the thighs, and that could lead to to the shoulder and can contribute to the back pain. So it is important your foot should rest on the floor, if not a foot support. Back of seat provides good lower back support, and you can also see the way how this seat is designed. It is shaped in the curve of your back. Okay, and this part, the lumbar. Okay, so there should be a back support to support your lower back. Now if you just go to internet and you type good DSC workstation requirements. So you could see many images. Again, what the major points that we have discussed. So visually you could see the first image, it is a wrong sitting posture. So where the user is shrugging off the shoulder, and also look at the you know the feet, how it is positioned, and the eyes and the top line of the monitor is not at the same level. So because of that, he has to move forward to view the screen. Okay. So this is what I told you regarding the why it is important for the foot to rest on the floor, so that there will be no pressure on underside of thighs and backs of legs. Okay. So DSC risk assessment, things to consider. So these are the equipments for a DSC user, they would use a screen, chair, desk, keyboards, environment, the lighting, temperature, ventilation, and most importantly, again, people often overlook this part, the software. Okay, so think about you're working with a software which is not compatible with your work. Okay, so the software is not user friendly, or the performance of your screen, I mean your device is very slow. Okay, so this can only increase your working hours and may cause frustration and fatigue to the workers. So the software that you're using is not compatible to the work that you're doing, or if your system is having a very poor or slow performance system. Okay, so it only causes frustrations, and it doesn't it only reduces the productivity. And then mouse, there are many mouses that are ergonomically designed. Okay, and then the worker, as a worker, if they have any musculoskeletal disorders like history of back pains, or then that should also be taken into consideration. And accordingly, the working environment, the working hours, everything must be remodified. Now if you want, you can check these features more informations here, but again, it is not required for the context of your risk assessment, but for a general informations, you can use this. Okay, this document which talks about a checklist. So DAC workstation checklist, like what we have discussed here. So screens or chairs or desk or keyboard. If you're doing a very detailed risk assessment for a DAC user, then this checklist would be very handy. So you look at the keyboard, and these are the points that you're going to make a note of it when you're doing a DSC, workstation assessment. So you check whether the keyboard separate from the screen. Does the keyboard tilt? Okay. Is it possible to find a comfortable keying position? So the image visual representation explains more. You could clearly see the first image, which is a correct, keyboard position, or the comfortable keyboard position, compared to the second, third, and fourth image. Okay, so there should be some space in front of the keyboard to rest your wrist. Okay, so likewise for mouse, what are the good requirements of mouse? Okay, and then for the display screens. Okay, so the characters should be very clear and readable. The font size, the text size should be comfortable to read. Okay, so this is related to display screen. And then the software that you're using, whether it is suitable for the task. Okay, and then the furnitures. Okay, the tables and the chair, are they ergonomically designed and puts you in a comfortable posture? And finally, the environment, the lighting, you know do you have a suitable lighting? What about the air, the ventilation, the temperatures, heat level, is it comfortable? What about noise, or the levels of noise comfortable? So this checklist, it provides you a detailed assessment for a DSC. Okay, so even at your workplace, where definitely there would be people who are DSC user. Okay, like people who are working in an office setup, or anybody who works with these screens. So this assessment will help to identify the symptoms and the long-term effects that have been contributing for due to the poor workstation requirements. Okay. So next is manual handling. Okay. So we will take a 15-minute break. and then we would continue with 6.2 manual handling. Welcome back after the break. So before the break, we discussed about work-related upper limb disorders. Okay. So just an example of how to write uh, the section 2 risk assessment for the hazard category, which is work-related upper limb disorder. Okay. So the hazard category is work-related upper limb disorders. So remember, the hazard category should be from the 21 list from this syllabus. Okay. So here the example I have taken is the work-related upper limb disorder is the hazard category. And for hazard description, so you must give a clear description of what the hazard is. Okay. So like yesterday when we were discussing about the hazard description for noise or vibration. Okay. So you have to clearly tell what is the source of noise. Okay. So like the equipment or the process or the machinery and for what purpose it is being used. So likewise, if I have to give a clear description of a WRULD, so here who is performing what activity which could result in upper limb disorder. So warehouse operatives, they are performing repetitive packing task. Okay. So they are doing a packing which is a repetitive task at a fixed workstation where they are sealing cartons and applying labels by hand. Okay, so think about a box, a carton box. So where they will have to seal the carton box and put a label. So all this is done manually, and they are doing this for 6 to 8 hours per shift without rotation or structured rest breaks. So my hazard is clearly defined, who and what they are doing and why it may contribute to upper limb disorder. So, and then column number 2, who might be harmed and how. Okay. So, who might be harmed? The warehouse packers, how they could be harmed. Just give me a moment. I have to take this call. Just give me a minute. Yes. Thank you. So warehouse packers, who and how they might be harmed, okay, and what is the consequences, the severity of harm, okay. So repetitive wrist and finger movement causing. So like I said, we should not give a generic information like it leads to injury or ill health. You have to be very specific when defining the severity. So causing work-related upper limb disorders, including carpal tunnel syndrome, tendonitis, and tenosynovitis. For this, you can do a research, or you could include other terms like a muscle weakening or tendons or ligament damage. Okay, so try to include 2 to 3, the technical terms when writing the consequences. So, and here the control measures, what we have discussed before the break. So, workstation height adjustable via hydraulic platform, workers trained on manual handling awareness, and then 2 15-minute rest breaks per shift, because we have clearly mentioned that they are working without rest. And then PPE like wrist support gloves if available. Okay, and then additional control measures, further actions, job rotation, ergonomic workstation assessment, and provide specific upper limb disorder awareness training. and then introduce semi-automated label applicator. So they are now using, applying labels by hand. So for example, if we go and you can even go and search this. Okay. So label applicated machine. So this will completely avoid, applying labels by hand. Okay. Yes. So the controls, as you see, I've included a range of control measures. So simply writing one or two or three control measure will not help you to show your understanding of the subject. So include a range of controls, which is very much relevant to the hazard that you have described in column 1. And then the role of the responsible person who is responsible for implementing the actions in this column number 4, and for each of the action we should give a time scale. So for the first action, immediate; second action, medium term; third action, medium term; and then here, so it is not mentioned, so I will include long term or medium term. So it shouldn't cost you much. So again, a medium term. Okay. So we have covered one complete row for the hazard category, work related upper limb disorders. So we start with giving a description of the hazard, then who might be harmed and how, and then we are going to identify a range of controls, which includes the existing controls and additional controls, and then who is responsible for implementing the additional controls, and what is the timeline for each of the additional controls to be implemented. Now, to arrange the controls in column 3 and column 4, like we discussed yesterday, you can have less in column 3, more in column 4, or more in column 3, less 4. The way how you arrange the control, it is absolutely anything that is realistic you can do. So for example, I can remove this and I can include here. Okay. So if I'm including it in column 3, now there's only 2 actions in column 2. So that means I don't need these time scales. I have to remove these time scales. Okay. So now it becomes more in column 3, less in column 4. So whichever way you're going to rearrange the control, as long as it is realistic, it should be absolutely fine. Okay. All right. Now continuing with learning outcome 6.2, manual handling. Okay. So how you define manual handling, or what is manual handling? The movement of a load by human effort alone. So where you are moving a load by using your body force. Okay. So this includes lifting, pushing, pulling, carrying, and putting down objects. So any task which includes lifting, pushing, pulling, carrying, and putting down object by human effort alone is called as manual handling. Okay. So HSC has estimated 17% of non-fatal injuries reported are from handling, lifting, and carrying. Okay. So all types of workers are at risk, whether regular manual jobs are carried out or the work is mostly done while seated. Okay. So common types of manual handling injury. So these are the information that you would be recording in column number 2. Okay. So where we say who and how they might be harmed. So the how part, which will include the injuries. So it is important that you include this, list. So again, it shows you a good understanding of manual handling concepts. So prolapse disc, herniated disc, strained ligaments. So ligaments, connective tissues which connects bone to bone, tendon strains, muscles strains, and hernia. So we'll see what are these. And then improper manual handling could lead to heavy loads being dropped on the fingers, legs, or feet. So that could lead to cuts, abrasions. Okay, surface layer of the skin will be teared, crushing, or fracture. So this can happen if you drop the load onto your fingers or onto your legs, or you fall with the load. Okay. So back injuries are the most common consequence of bad manual handling. Okay. So if you look at the human spine, it consists of a series of bones called vertebrae. Okay, we are not going to explain what this part, but we are just going to list what injury it is. So the spine is a series of bones called vertebrae. So these are all the individual bones. Okay, and they're called vertebrae. And each vertebra is separated by a fibrous intervertebral disc. Okay, so you could see they are separated by a disc. Okay, each bone. So when force is applied to the spine, the disc act as a shock absorber. So the disc acts as a shock absorber, which to prevent damage to the disc. So the disc consists of two parts: a jelly-like nucleus containing about 80% water, and an outer shell containing several layers of fibers. Okay, so you could see that each vertebra is separated by a disc, and the disc contains, it acts as a shock absorber, and it contains 80% of water, and it contains several layers of fiber. Okay. So as people get older, the disc lose their flexibility and are more prone to damage. Okay. Improper manual handling can cause prolapsed or herniated disc. So we'll see what is meant by prolapsed disc and herniated disc. Okay. So prolapse disc occurs when the disc bulges outwards and makes contact with the spinal cord. So this in turn can cause compression of the nerve root, leading to significant pain. Okay. So the disc, it bulges out because of the wear and tear of the disc. It bulges out, and it goes and causes compression of the nerve that is passing through your spine. Okay, so when the nerve is disturbed, it causes significant pain. So here the concept is it bulges outwards. Okay, whereas herniated disc occurs when the liquid in the nucleus breaks through the fibrous layers of the disc and spurts out into the spinal cord. So that is herniated disc. Okay. Next, ligaments, like I said, it binds bone to bone, and tendons bind muscle to bone. So tendonitis is the inflammation or the swelling of the tendons. So this can lead to joint pain. So good manual handling technique. So if your work involves manual handling, so there is a good, manual handling technique that needs to be adopted. So number one is think before handling on lifting. So you always look at the load. Okay. So what is the weight of the load? What is the size of the load? Okay. And what is the load content? Is it a sharp object or a glass object, or is it a hot object? So if I look at this weight of the load, will I be able to lift the load alone, or do I need team lift? Okay. And look at the load, whether there is a proper grip or a handle from where I can lift the load. So all these will need to be assessed in relation to the load. Okay. So size of the load, weight of the load, does it have a proper handle or a grip point? What is the actual load a content, whether it is a sharp object or a hot object. So you're going to think before handling and lifting, and you're also going to think about the environment where you're going to carry the load. Okay. So for example, what is the floor condition? Is it slippery? Do I have proper lighting on the walkway where I'm carrying the load? Okay. Will I be using a staircase? Do I have sufficient space to carry? So these again, in terms of environment, you will be assessing. Then you start your lifting. So if you think that yes, the load is of reasonable size, it is of reasonable weight, it has a proper grip point, the environment, there is a proper lighting, no slippery surface, even surface, then you start your lifting. So with lifting, keep the load close to your waist. Okay, so always keep your load close to your waist and not away from your waist. Okay, so by keeping close to your waist, it will minimize the effort or the force required to hold the weight. Okay, and not like away from the from the waist. And then your leg position in relation to the load, it should be like this. So do not keep your feet together, keep your feet apart, so you get a good balance when you're lifting the load from the ground. Okay, so if this is the load, you can see how the feet should be positioned. And then you ensure a good hold. Okay, so when you're lifting the load from the ground, make sure you use your hand and not the fingers. Okay, use your hand to get a good hold. Slight bending of the back, hips and the knees, and most importantly, you should bend your knees. Okay, if you're not bending your knees or if you're stooping, then it puts more weight onto your back. Okay, now for instance, let's look at the image. See, if you could see the bottom image. Okay, the bottom image, the third image at the bottom, that is stooping. Okay, uh, we could clearly see the knees, the legs are not bent. Okay, so without bending your knees, if you lift an object from the ground, so this stooping posture will put more weight on the back to support your weight. So that should not be the case. Okay, again, you could clearly see how the person has positioned the leg, the knees and leg is bent and the back is straight. Okay, and okay. So now you ensure a good hold, slight bending of the back, hips and knees. Then avoid twisting your back or leaning sideways. Okay. So if you feel that you're not able to make a good grip, or if you think the load is unstable, or if the load is heavy, then you should not continue the lift. Okay. And then you keep your head up and move smoothly. Okay. So again, you see the load is kept very close to the waist. Okay, and then finally you put down the load and then adjust the load. Okay, so here you see the 6 pointers. It is very clear that first is you have to do a initial assessment before lifting. Okay, particularly you're going to look at the load and the environment, and then how you're going to position your load against your body, and then your feet position in relation to the load. And when lifting, you should not you should bend your back, hips and knees, and then avoid stretching or twisting or leaning sideways, and then you move and finally position the load and then adjust. Okay. So avoiding or minimizing manual handling risk. Okay. So when you're doing a manual handling risk assessment, there are four factors that we need to consider. Okay. And in short, you can remember them as TILE. TILE. Okay. So TILE means task, individual, load, and environment. So these are the four factors you're going to consider. For each of the factor, check what are the risks and accordingly the controls to be implemented. For example, if I look at the task, okay, so what are the risk factor associated with the task? Number one is, what is the distance of the load from the trunk? Okay, so the trunk, what is the trunk? Excluding your limb is called your trunk. Okay. Okay. So this part is your trunk. Excluding your upper limb and lower limb, this part of the body is called the trunk. Okay. And now, for example, uh, now see here this image. Okay. So here you look at the task and you read the first line. What is the distance of load from the trunk? Okay, so you could clearly see by lifting the load from the top, the distance of the load from the trunk is far away. Okay, so when if the load is close to my body, lifting a 5 kg weight, and if the load is far away from the body and lifting a 5 kg weight, you could see the difference. Okay, even though the weight is same, let's assume 5 kg. Imagine lifting a load which is very close to the body and lifting a load which is away from the body. So if it is away from the body, then the risk is very high. Okay. So if the distance of load from the trunk is high, then awkward loads means maybe heavier on one hand. So keep the heavier end close to the body. If your task requires twisting, stooping, overreaching, then change the system of work. Okay. Or if your task requires excessive lifting or lowering, then store items at waist height. Okay. So like table height, you store the item so you don't have to, bend every time to pick a load from the ground or to unload the load onto the ground. And then
Mm,
distance, try to shorten
mm,
it. So if I have to carry or support the load for 20-meter distance, then reduce the distance. For example, if I have to carry the load from the ground floor to the third story of the building, which requires like 30 or 40 meters of, travel distance. So try to shorten it. And then if your task requires pushing or pulling, try to push load rather than pull them. So always push the load, like rather pulling the load, because pulling requires more force than pushing. And then what is the frequency, duration, and repetition? So if the frequency is high, like every 5 minutes, there is, a task of lifting load, or if my manual handling task duration is long, or if my, repetition is very high, then introduce job rotation or introduce more extra breaks. So it gives you, a time for your muscles to rest. And then what is the work rate imposed by process? If the work rate is high, then slow the rate of a conveyor being used or consider automation. So these are the risk factors that you're going to identify relation to task, and for each of the risk identified, what are the appropriate controls. Next, the factor is the individual. Okay, so who is the individual who would be undertaking the manual handling task? So the risk factor for the individual is if that task requires unusual strength or height required. So if I lack that stamina or the strength, then I should not be involved. If I have any health issues like back pain or muscle injury, I should not be involved in manual handling task. If I lack training, okay, like the handling techniques, I should not be involved. Or if I'm a young person, okay, or if I'm an elderly person, okay, or consider about the gender, whether it is a male or female. So because for female the maximum weight that they can support is less compared to the male. So all this should be carefully considered when undertaking the risk assessment. So unusual strength is required or height required, then accordingly you select the individuals, carefully assess so the person does not have any history of or other symptoms of manual handling injuries. Training must be provided on safe lifting and handling techniques, and then focus on the selection in terms of the age and the gender. The third risk factor is the load. So what is the weight of the load? If the load is heavy, okay, if the load is heavy, see if you can break the load into smaller parts. Okay, by breaking, let's say, a 20 kg load into smaller parts of, like 5 kg, if that is feasible, then that can be done. If not, use team lifting. So rather one person lifting and carrying a load of 20 kg, use team lifting where two-person will support the same load. Size and shape. Okay, now imagine if I have to carry an empty carton box. Okay, the weight is empty, but the dimension of the box is, let's say, it is 1 meter width. Okay, so the dimension of the empty box if I'm carrying is 1 meter width. So you could see how much I have to stretch my hand to hold or to grip that object. Okay, so again, if it is of abnormal shape or size, then you have to consider team lifting or split the load if possible. Okay, so the maximum width is 0.75 meter. If it is more than 0.75 meter, definitely it would be very awkward for someone to carry of that load bulkiness. And then what about the ease of grasping? Do we have a proper handle, or is there any a grip from where I can lift the load? What about the stability of the load? Okay, so load, it should be of proper packaging. Okay, so when I'm lifting or carrying the load, it should not cause any movement of the load. So it should be very stable. And then center of gravity, so where the supply should clearly mark which side is the heavy, which is the less heavy side, because you should always lift from the heavier part. So heavier part should be kept close to your body. And then temperature, delay moving load until temperature has stabilized. If there are any, like for the load, like for example, if you are carrying any hot object, okay, or if you are carrying any object which has sharp edges, cover the sharp edges before moving. So anything which is related to the load which can cause or increase the risk of manual handling, then these are the controls to be implemented. And finally, the environment where you're doing the task. What about the space? Do you have sufficient space to carry the load? Okay, because I don't want to hit in the wall when carrying the load. What about the condition? Do I have a clear, a floor? Okay, like no broken tiles, And then what about the variations of floor level? Will I be using any staircases? Okay, if I have to use a staircase, then use a lift. Okay. And then are there any obstacles like poor housekeeping? What about the temperature? Okay, the temperature level, humidity, ventilation, because this task requires more physical effort. So if you're doing a physical task in a very high temperature or in a humid conditions or where the ventilation is poor, then it increases the risk factors. And then what about the weather? Are you wearing an appropriate clothing? I don't want to wear any tight fitting pant when doing this task where the temperatures are hot. Similarly, I don't want to wear a very loose clothing in temperature where it is cold. So appropriate clothing is required. And then what about the lighting and visibility? So do I have a good visible lighting where I can see even if there is any spill hazard, I can able to see, because if someone falls with the load, the injury could be very severe. So the tile factors, task, individual, load, and environment should be assessed separately. And for each of the factors contributing to the risk, identify the appropriate controls. Okay. So now we'll look into the example of manual handling. Hazard category is manual handling. So the topic is here, number 8. Okay. Hazard description: workers manually unloading 25 kg cement bags from the rear of a flatbed delivery lorry. Okay, so the truck has arrived for unloading, and workers are unloading 25 kg of cement from the lorry. And then not just unloading, they are also carrying them. The distance that they are carrying is 20 meters across uneven ground to the storage area on this side. So three risk factors identified. One is the weight, okay, and second is the distance that they are carrying, and third is the ground conditions which is uneven. And also the load is being lifted from the rear of a flatbed delivery lorry. So who might be harmed and how? Workers. Okay, so what is the nature of injury? Back strain, disc herniation, the herniated disc or prolapsed disc from heavy loads with awkward posture. Okay, and apart from that, it can also cause injuries where you drop the bag or the into your body, like you drop it onto your leg, or you fall with the load. So those can cause crush injuries to the feet or lower limbs. Okay, so I try to include some of the consequences that we covered here. Okay. So I included a herniated disc. You can talk about strained ligaments or muscle strains. And then, if the load is a sharp object, then you can write about cuts or crushing and fractures. Okay. So range of injuries must be included. And then the control measures. A site induction includes manual handling briefing. Delivery is limited to mornings when ground conditions are best. 2% lift required for bags over 20 kg. Use a mechanical pallet truck or a forklift. This will eliminate carrying the load for 20 meters. Okay, so a mechanical pallet truck. So the pallet truck image. So use a pallet truck. Still you're going to push and pull, but it will eliminate carrying the load. Okay. And then arrange deliveries of 10 kg or 15 kg bags. Okay. So see if you can reduce the weight of the bag. Okay, so the bags are delivered at 25 kg. Now arrange deliveries of 15 kg or 10 kg bags to reduce load per lift and provide specific manual handling training. Okay, so this briefing alone will not be adequate. So providing manual handling training for all laborers involved in unloading tasks. Okay, so again the controls, range of controls, and who is responsible, and for each of the three controls identified in column 4, the the time frame is mentioned. Okay, so if you're going to write about manual handling, read the information from your study book and see if you can get hold of some documents related to manual handling. For example, I would go to the HSC website or any regulatory body and you type manual handling. If not, you can go to the reference document, okay, and then move to manual handling and see if there is any guidance document. So here it is, guidance document, manual handling. So you can copy and you could paste it here. And now you have a reference document. So your study book, along with this reference document, you read them once, understand the topic manual handling, and then how you can prepare a draft by using the informations from the study book and from other reference document to prepare appropriate information for the category manual handling. So similarly, if you're going to write about noise, okay, if you're going to write about noise, read the information from the study book on chapter 5.1 noise and look for any informations related to noise, such as, for example, here, so guidance documents, or maybe from other regulatory body like OSHA or Dubai municipality. So if you can get any guidance document about the topic noise, read those informations and then you write draft a complete row for noise based on what you have studied from your book and other resource. So this is the approach that we should do. Okay. So first you're going to list what are the categories I'm going to include, and each of the category I'm going to do my study, and then so I can write appropriate information. Okay. So you could see everything is connected. So first I write my description. Based on the description, I'm writing who and how, and then again, based on the description, I'm writing the relevant controls. Like for example, reducing the weight of the bag, including 2% lift, or using a mechanical pallet to reduce the carrying distance. So all, and then most importantly, manual handling training. So your controls must be very much relevant and addressing these issues. And the last two columns, it's no challenge here. So just identify the role and the time scale. Okay, so again I'm repeating, first complete your section 1 background, take your own time for 1 week, and then you start immediately with the section 2. Okay, so it would take some time, but in that process you're also going to study and learn more about the different hazard categories from this syllabus. Okay, all right, so I'll just stop with 6.2, and I would also be sharing some videos from WorkSafe BC. So these are like 2-3 minutes clips, which I want to check also. So lifting in the workplace, in preventing lifting injuries. So I'll just share these links in the WhatsApp group. So just look into it. It gives these visuals and videos, uh, you know, uh, improves, our understanding of the topics. Okay. And also see, these are all I'm not going to share in the link because they're already available in this document. Okay. So all the, for example, display screen. So this document is what we have discussed. Okay. And then manual handling, you can check this. And then for upper limb disorders. Okay. Uh, so again, here this reference document, mostly it is from HSC, Health and Safety Executive, but you do not have to be confined with one regulatory body. So any regulatory body, their resource can be used for your exam preparation. Okay. All right. So tomorrow we will continue with load handling equipment. What are load handling equipment and different load handling equipment like forklift truck, conveyors, lift, and mobile cranes. So for each of these load handling equipment, what are the hazards and control measures? And then we would be moving to element number 7, which is about chemical and biological. So the topic is hazardous substances. So tomorrow we would start and complete chapter 6, last learning outcome, load handling equipment. And then we would continue with the learning outcome of element number 7, which is hazardous substances. Okay. So meanwhile, whenever you get time, try to read, your study book, get familiar with the topics, especially for those who are new to health and safety, because we have different learners. So learners who are new to health and safety, others, who may have a few experience or a substantial experience. So whatever the message, I'm targeting very much the learners who are new to health and safety. Okay. So try to watch as many videos for references and refer many sources, because other learners, they would have gained the knowledge from their work experience. Okay. So if I am lacking that as as an additional, then it is my responsibility that I have to spend more time reading and about the hazard categories and watching more videos. Okay. All right. So tomorrow we will continue and with 6.3. And meanwhile, if you have any doubts when you're preparing your section 1, okay. So if you already started with your section 1, any place where you are stuck, or if you need, any assistance, let me know for section 1. Okay. So do not make any assumption, even with the slightest doubt, get clarified. Okay. All right. So thank you and have a good one. I'll catch you tomorrow for day 17.